I'm Brittany, 21 years old, and somewhere along the way, my existence turned into an endless chore rotation that nobody else acknowledges. My younger brothers and sisters sprawl across the couch laughing while my mother unwinds in her chair, and meanwhile, I'm elbow deep in soapy water, hauling garbage down 3 flights of stairs, working past midnight to restore order that everyone else conveniently overlooks. The evening it all fell apart, I dropped a tower of crusted dishes onto the counter with a crash and finally voiced what had been burning inside me. Why does everything fall on me? Silence, then a casual shrug, an annoyed glance, scattered laughter. When I pressed harder, when I dared suggest the arrangement was unjust, nobody apologized. Instead, I heard the phrase that had shadowed me since childhood. You're too sensitive. Those words cut deeper than any argument ever could. Standing there with dish soap dripping from my fingers, trembling with frustration, I understood they didn't just assume I would handle everything. They assumed I would never challenge it. I thought, that realization changed everything. While they dismissed my concerns and returned to their glowing screens, I quietly began mapping my escape. Within a single day, I would be gone, and the girl they dismissed as overly emotional was about to become the person holding their world together without even realizing it. If you've ever been treated like unpaid household staff by your own relatives, stick around until the final moment. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, and drop a comment telling me what you'd do if your parent let your siblings coast while forcing you to shoulder every responsibility alone. The day everything shattered wasn't marked by anything special. No celebration, no milestone, just an ordinary Tuesday that would split my timeline into 2 halves. I'd been at university since early morning, sitting through lectures, completing quizzes, collaborating on group assignments, then wolfing down a sandwich while standing in the staff break room at my part-time job. By the time my shift wrapped up, my legs ached, and my thoughts felt scattered. Quote 4. I remember thinking. Quote 5. I turned my key in our apartment door, and instantly knew rest wasn't happening. The stench arrived first. Rotting leftovers, unwashed clothing, something sticky spreading across surfaces where it had no business being. Our living space resembled the aftermath of a natural disaster that had decided to become permanent. Controllers scattered across the floor, drinking cups balanced on every available ledge, an entire snack bag ground into the furniture fabric. For several seconds, I simply stood frozen, backpack weighing down my shoulder, keys clutched in my palm, staring. You know that sensation when exhaustion runs so deep your body temperature drops instead of rising? That was my state. I tossed my keys toward the entrance table. They skidded off a mountain of unopened envelopes, overdue notices, and utility statements I typically sorted, settled, monitored. Things nobody else had even glanced at. From down the hallway came the sound of carefree laughter mixed with blaring video content. I walked into the common area, stepped on abandoned plastic, heard it crack beneath my shoe. Nobody even turned their head. Can someone pause that for just a moment? My voice came out eerily controlled. One face rotated slightly in my direction. What's the issue? I drew a breath I couldn't spare. I'd tried the emotional route countless times before, pleading, explaining, breaking down. This time I wanted facts, clarity, something undeniable. Look at this space, I said. I walked in 5 minutes ago from work. Who exactly do you think will clean this disaster? Silence, then a careless shrug. Don't know, not my problem. I had a rough day too. Something inside me fractured. I crossed to the television and pressed the power button. The screen went dark. Now every eye focused on me. This ends today, I announced. We're creating a responsibility system right now. No more me handling everything while you do absolutely nothing. I'm juggling university and employment, and I refuse to be your unpaid cleaning service. Immediately, the protests erupted. Why are you losing it? You always pull this. It's just clutter. You're being ridiculous. My mother appeared then, wiping her palms on a kitchen towel as though she'd been occupied with meal preparation, despite the takeout containers clearly visible behind her. Quote 14. I turned to face her directly. Quote 15. She frowned like I'd insulted her character. Brittany, that's simply not accurate. I handle plenty around here, and you're the eldest. You should be setting an example. Setting an example, I repeated. Of what exactly? Teaching them that ignoring problems makes someone else solve them? Showing them how to be a doormat? The room fell into that thick silence that precedes an explosion. I pushed forward anyway. Peace was already shattered. There was nothing left worth protecting. I pulled a notebook from my bag, sat at our table, started sketching a basic grid. 3 columns, 7 rows, dishes, garbage, laundry, floors. I wrote my name at the top of the first column, left the others blank. We're handling this like functioning adults, I stated. Everyone assumes duties. Everyone follows through. My siblings groaned audibly. My mother crossed her arms defensively. This is absurd. They have academic commitments and activities. They're occupied. I met her gaze steadily. I have academics and paid employment. I'm still managing all of this. If they're mature enough to leave mess everywhere and consume food in common areas, they're mature enough to rinse their own plates and handle trash removal. She rolled her eyes. There it was again. That small, dismissive gesture that communicated, here she goes again. You really need to settle down, she said. You're creating drama over trivial matters. Trivial. That word seared. My time, my energy, my mental well-being. All trivial. My voice dropped lower, steadier. I'm not creating drama. I'm establishing a boundary. I will not continue living this way. That's when my mother delivered the sentence that transformed everything from an argument into a life decision. Quote 27. For years, that phrase had functioned like a threat, a method to silence me, to remind me I was dependent, trapped, powerless. This time it landed completely differently. Instead of triggering fear, it sparked absolute clarity. You know those moments when the room seems suddenly brighter, like someone activated a switch inside your consciousness? I looked at her, truly saw her for what felt like the first time, and then I nodded calmly. I said. She blinked, visibly thrown. Quote, 30. Quote, 31. I replied. Quote, 32. They all erupted simultaneously, accusations, mockery, dismissals. Quote, 33. But internally, my decision had crystallized completely. I thought about the overdue statements I managed, the schedules I coordinated, the chaos I continually restored. I thought about how comfortable their lives would remain until the precise day I simply stopped holding everything in place. Have you ever had someone throw quote 34 at you, completely unaware you're finally prepared to accept that offer? Because that's precisely what happened next. That same evening, the instant I retreated to my bedroom, the noise from the common area faded as though someone had closed a soundproof door inside my mind. My hands still trembled, but no longer from fear. This was pure adrenaline. My bedroom was cramped, barely accommodating a bed, dresser, and miniature desk, but it represented the only territory in our entire apartment that belonged exclusively to me. I closed the door, pressed my spine against it, and permitted myself to ask the question I'd always suppressed. What if I actually leave? Not eventually, not when circumstances improve. Right now. For the first time ever, the concept didn't feel absurd. It felt achievable, terrifying, messy, overwhelming. Yes, but genuinely possible. I grabbed my phone and opened my contacts. There was one person I knew would listen without judgment. Jasmine. We worked together at the coffee shop, The coworker who constantly joked that I basically held two full-time positions, university student and unpaid family manager. I typed, deleted, then finally sent, quote, 36, quote, her response arrived within seconds. Quote, 37. Minutes later, I was explaining everything. The confrontation, the responsibility chart, the quote 38. Ultimatum, and the part I hadn't vocalized to anyone yet. I think I genuinely want to go. She didn't respond with sympathy or tell me I was overreacting. She sent a single sentence that made my chest loosen. Quote, 40. While my family occupied the living room, assuming I'd cool down and return to scrubbing their plates, I sat cross-legged on my bed and opened a search tab. Affordable rooms near campus? I wasn't starting from nothing. I had savings from the coffee shop. Not substantial, but sufficient for a deposit if I found something modest. I had steady income. I had a manager who valued my work and would happily extend my hours if needed. Scrolling through available listings, I remembered every previous time I'd thought, I wish I could escape, before forcing myself to stop dreaming because hope hurt too intensely. This time, I didn't stop myself. One posting caught my attention. Compact room, shared apartment, older construction, but only 3 subway stops from university and cheaper than anticipated. I studied the photographs. Plain white walls, a slim bed, a modest window. It didn't look impressive, but in my imagination, it looked like liberation. You know that expression people use? They'll never survive without me. I used to consider it melodramatic. Now I recognized it as simple truth. My family couldn't perceive half of what I accomplished. The correspondence I answered for my mother, the paperwork I completed, the late penalties I prevented, the calls I placed when systems malfunctioned. If I departed, the household wouldn't literally collapse, but their carefully maintained comfort absolutely would. And for the first time, I wanted them to experience even a fraction of the burden I'd been carrying alone. I contacted the landlord, half expecting silence. Instead, my phone rang immediately. A calm voice spoke. This evening? My pulse accelerated. I checked the time. If I departed immediately, I could make it. I informed my mother I was going for a walk. She didn't even glance up from her device. Take your house keys, she said. Don't stay out late. If she'd actually looked at my expression, really studied my face, she might have detected something had shifted. But she didn't. That hurt more than I wanted to acknowledge, and it propelled me even closer to action. The room matched the photographs exactly. Small, basic, quiet. The landlord reviewed the terms, the monthly cost, the deposit requirements. I responded automatically. My consciousness split between the conversation and replaying the words, "You're too sensitive," and "If you don't like it, leave." "Do you want it?" he asked. "There's another interested party viewing this weekend." I heard myself respond, "Yes, I want it." When I departed, I held keys that didn't belong to my mother's apartment. My hands trembled the entire journey home. This was no longer fantasy. I had secured a destination. Tonight. Back in my bedroom, I shut the door and retrieved a duffel bag. Clothing first, my laptop, essential documents, possessions I'd purchased with my own earnings. I wasn't running away like a child. I was relocating like an adult who'd finally comprehended she didn't have to exist as everyone's contingency plan. For a brief moment, guilt flooded through me. Quote 52. Then another thought answered, sharp and crystalline. Quote 53. I wasn't trying to destroy them. I was trying to prevent them from destroying me. But if that meant some overdue payments and panic along the way, I was finished shielding them from consequences. I zipped the bag, took one final look at the bedroom that had never truly belonged to me, and stepped into the hallway with my heart pounding violently. My mother called from the couch without turning her head. Where are you going with that bag? This time, I didn't fabricate. Quote, 55. I said. Quote, 56. Have you ever watched someone's expression transform from confident to terrified in 3 seconds? Because that's precisely what I witnessed when she finally looked at me. For several heartbeats, nobody spoke. The television hummed in the background, filling the void with recorded laughter that felt completely inappropriate for the moment. My mother sat upright. She said. I tightened my grip on the strap. My siblings stared like I'd announced I was relocating to another continent. You're not serious, one said. You always make threats like this. No, I answered, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. I always consider it. I never vocalize it. Today, I'm both saying it and executing it. My mother's expression shifted again, from irritation to anger. Quote 64. The list emerged like reflex. The roof overhead, the meals provided, the sacrifices made. I swallowed hard. She snapped. I said. I could observe panic beginning to infiltrate her eyes even as she attempted maintaining her stance. Quote 72. The honest answer was straightforward. Quote 71. But I understood she didn't want to hear that. I walked to the table, collected the stack of unpaid statements, and placed them directly in front of her. Here's electricity, internet, the rent reminder. I've been monitoring all of this. From now forward, you'll need to handle it yourself, or teach them how. Her mouth opened, then closed. She'd always relied on me managing the tedious responsibilities. Suddenly tedious had transformed into terrifying. Quote, 73, she protested. I felt bitter laughter rise in my chest. My siblings finally contributed. Voices climbing. I said. I could observe them cycling through predictable reactions. Denial, anger, guilt manipulation. Chatron, quote 78. Perhaps I would miss them. In fact, I knew I would. But missing someone isn't equivalent to being obligated to destroy yourself for them. I placed my phone number on a sticky note and pressed it onto the refrigerator, though they already possessed it. Next to it, I wrote a simple sentence. If you need guidance, call. If you need a housekeeper, hire one. My mother read it and her face contorted. You're being cruel. No, I said quietly. I'm finally being honest. I didn't anticipate a cinematic reconciliation. I didn't receive one. There were no tears, embraces, sudden understanding. There were raised voices, accusations, and a door slammed forcefully. Mine, as I departed. The hallway outside our apartment felt transformed that day. I'd walked it thousands of times, always returning to the identical cycle. This time, every step carried me further from the version of myself who believed she had no alternatives. The subway journey to my new place passed in a blur. Noise, lights, strangers. My new keys felt substantial in my pocket. I kept touching them, needing to confirm their reality. The room remained empty when I arrived, just the slim bed and bare walls awaiting me. I dropped my bag, sat down, and for the first time in years there were no dishes demanding my attention, no laundry accumulating, no voice shouting from another room asking where something was located. The silence was so complete it almost ached. I permitted myself to cry for several minutes, not because I regretted leaving, but because stepping out of a role you've performed your entire life feels like losing part of yourself, even when that part was killing you. My phone vibrated. A string of messages from home. Where did you put the detergent? How do I pay the internet bill? When are you coming back? You can't just ignore us. I stared at the screen. The old version of me would have rushed back, or at minimum walked them through every step, performing emotional and logistical labor from a distance. The new version typed something different. You can figure it out. Read the labels. Call the company. There are instructions on the bills. That was all. I pressed send. No apologies, no over-explaining, just truth. They were capable. They'd simply never been forced to be. A minute later, another message appeared. Quote 85. I took a breath and replied. Quote 86. No answer followed. Not immediately, just 3 dots appearing and vanishing. Have you ever finally walked away from a situation that was destroying you, then sat in that first moment of silence wondering if you're courageous or selfish or both? Because that's precisely where I was, sitting on that slim bed in a room that smelled like fresh paint and possibility. I thought leaving would conclude the story. I was mistaken. Leaving was merely the beginning. The real consequence was what occurred when they realized I was serious, and that nobody remained to quietly repair everything they'd been ignoring. The initial few days in my new room felt like walking around with weight removed from my shoulders and new pressure settling on my chest. The freedom was genuine. So was the fear. I woke to my own alarm, not to someone shouting my name because they couldn't locate their belongings. I made coffee for one person. I left a single mug in the sink and actually had time to wash it before rushing out. No accumulation, no sticky surfaces, nobody waiting for me to repair what they'd broken. But the silence amplified my phone's buzzing. On the third day, I was studying in the library when my screen illuminated. 10 missed calls from my mother, 3 from my brother, a flood of messages in our family group conversation. Quote 87. I stared at the notifications, pulse pounding. This was it. The beginning of the collapse. The part of me trained to jump up and fix everything was already halfway out of my chair. Then I remembered the note on the refrigerator. They weren't requesting guidance. They were requesting their housekeeper back. I forced myself to remain seated and texted back. Brief and clear. Check the back of the blue folder in the drawer beside the microwave. Everything is documented there. Call the number on the bill. Set up automatic payments. You're capable of this. Several seconds later, my phone rang again. I let it proceed to voicemail. I could hear my mother's voice in my head regardless. But that was precisely the point. It had always been complicated. I'd simply been the only one managing it. That evening, Jasmine and I sat on the floor of my new room, consuming instant noodles from mismatched bowls. She listened as I read the messages aloud. So they're already falling apart after 3 days, she said. That was rapid. I laughed, but it emerged shaky. I feel terrible. I understand how much stress these things cause. I don't want them to suffer. She tilted her head. But you were acceptable suffering alone? The words stung because they contained truth. For years, nobody had worried about how much pressure I was under. Now that pressure was landing on them, it was suddenly an emergency. You're not making them suffer, she added. You're providing them an opportunity to finally mature. You're not their parent. The following week proved she was correct, and also that growth is messy, loud, and typically arrives with substantial complaining. The messages continued arriving. How do you reset the router? Where's the landlord's number? The washing machine malfunctioned. There's mold in the refrigerator. What do we do? I answered some questions, the ones genuinely about learning. Unplug the router. Wait 30 seconds. Plug it back in. The landlord's number is on the lease. It's in the top drawer of the hallway cabinet. Scrub the mold. Discard old food. You need to check expiration dates. But the moment a message transformed into a demand, into blame, I withdrew. You're being selfish. You don't understand how difficult this is. You're ruining this family. Those received no response. One night around midnight, my phone vibrated again. This time a video call. I almost ignored it, but something in my chest wouldn't permit me. I answered. The camera displayed our kitchen, or what used to be our kitchen. Dishes stacked in the sink, overflowing garbage, a sticky stain spreading across the counter. My brother's face hovered in the corner of the screen, frantic. We can't do this, he said. Everything's a disaster. Mom's freaking out. We attempted the laundry and shrunk half of it. We forgot the trash and it smells like something died. I suppressed the first thing that came to mind, which was, that's what it looked like the entire time. You simply never noticed because I cleaned it. Instead, I asked, did you create a list? He frowned. A list of what? Everything that needs completion. How frequently? Who will handle what? That's your specialty, he said. You're skilled at organizing. I shook my head. No, it's not my specialty. It's a fundamental life skill. You'll need it whether I'm there or not. He groaned. Why are you being like this? Because, I said slowly, if I fix this for you now, you'll never learn, and I'll never be free. His eyes darted to someone off-screen, then my mother's voice cut in, sharp and exhausted. Quote, quote, 113. The word echoed. Quote, 14, I said. Quote, 115. A long pause. For the first time, I noticed how exhausted my mother appeared. Dark circles, hair shoved into a messy arrangement, a dish towel still clutched in her hand. Quote, 116. She muttered. Quote, 117. She stopped mid-sentence. I didn't need to complete it for her. And yet, I had been doing precisely that on top of my own academics and employment. Do you hear yourself? I asked softly. That's what I've been doing. Alone. Her eyes flickered. For a moment, I thought I detected something resembling realization. Then just as quickly, she pushed it away. You're stronger than them, she said. You can handle more. That was the falsehood I'd constructed my entire life around. Quote 122. I replied. Quote 123. She exhaled loudly. Quote 124. The call terminated before I could respond. I stared at my reflection on the darkened screen. My eyes were red, but not from crying, from holding together, from refusing to break the boundary I'd established. The next day at work, I made an error on a customer's order because my brain was half at the register, half in that kitchen. My manager pulled me aside. Quote, 125. He said. Quote, 126. I almost laughed. If only he knew. Days transformed into weeks. Gradually the messages shifted. Less blaming, more practical inquiries. Quote 127. I answered those calmly, without rushing, without offering to come do it for them. Then one afternoon, a different kind of message arrived. Not a question. A statement. My fingers froze above the keyboard. Before I could reply, another text appeared. I closed my eyes. Late rent meant late fees, warnings, genuine consequences. The old version of me would have drained my savings to repair it. The new version typed, quote, 130, quote. A long pause. Quote 131. I stared at those words. Quote 132. There it was, the beginning of the confession I'd needed for years. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. This wasn't a competition. It was my family's stability. But I also didn't rush in to rescue them. I wrote back, quote, 133, quote. That night, as I lay in my narrow bed, I realized something. My consequence wasn't about making them suffer. It was about forcing them to perceive the invisible work they'd taken for granted, and finally experience the cost of it. The question was, when they did perceive it, would it change anything between us, or would they simply resent me for walking away? I received my answer a week later when there was a knock on my door, and I opened it to find my mother standing in the hallway, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. For a moment I thought I was hallucinating. She never traveled to my side of town. Too far, too inconvenient, too much effort. Yet there she stood, clutching her purse like a lifeline, eyes scanning the narrow hallway. "Hello," she said. Her voice sounded exhausted. Not sharp, not defensive, just exhausted. I stepped aside. "Do you want to come in?" She hesitated, then nodded. My room suddenly felt even more cramped with her in it, like two worlds colliding in one confined space. She looked around. The bed, the tiny desk, the single chair. No clutter, no chaos. Just the evidence of my life stacked neatly in corners. "So this is where you've been?" she murmured. "Yeah," I replied. "This is it." For a moment we simply stood there, uncertain which versions of ourselves to be. The old pattern tugged at me. I almost asked if she wanted something to drink, if she'd eaten, if she was okay. Then I remembered why we were here, why I was here. She sat on the edge of my bed, smoothing the blanket like it was an excuse to avoid my eyes. Finally, she said, quote, 139, quote. I leaned against the wall and waited. Quote, 140. She shook her head. Quote, 141. Quote, 142. I said gently. Quote, 143. She flinched but didn't argue. That alone was new. "You're right," she admitted. "I dismissed you. I thought you were exaggerating. I thought you were just emotional. Too sensitive," I finished for her. She winced. "Yes." That silence stretched between us. Somewhere down the hall, someone increased their music volume. A dog barked. Life continued, indifferent to the fact that my mother was finally saying the words I'd needed for so long. Quote, 148, she said quietly. Not the dramatic kind of apology people deliver in films. A small, raw, almost embarrassed one. I swallowed. She said. She took a deep breath. Quote, 152. There it was. The real cost. Not just a messy kitchen or a pile of laundry. A home at risk because the person holding it together had walked away. I didn't say, "I told you so." I didn't have to. It hung there in the air between us. I asked. She looked up sharply. Quote, 156. Quote, 157. I said. Quote, 158. Her eyes filled, but she blinked the tears away. Quote, 159. She said. Quote, 1 to 60. Quote, 161. Is a complicated word, I thought, but I definitely wasn't drowning the way I had been. Then why are you here? I asked. She twisted the strap of her purse. Because the house is different without you. Quieter, less organized, less warm. Not because nobody is doing chores. We're trying, I promise. But because you were the one who held everyone together. And I didn't respect that. I weaponized it. The honesty in that sentence took my breath away. I'm not asking you to come clean, she continued. We're learning. The kids complain, but they're doing their part. I'm trying. I made a budget. We created a chore chart, for real this time. No one is erased from it. I pictured it. A chart where my name didn't fill every line, where other people's names had tasks next to them. It was a small thing. It was everything. I wanted to see you, she said simply. I miss my daughter. Not the worker I turned you into. You. I didn't answer immediately. My mind flashed through all the nights I'd cried while doing dishes, all the times she'd called me dramatic, ungrateful, too sensitive, all the birthdays and plans I'd sacrificed because the house needed me more. I thought about people who might be watching this, if my life were a video, waiting for me to say I forgave everything instantly or that I cut her off forever. But real life isn't that clean. I sat down in the chair across from her. I said. She nodded. I said. Quote, Achos 172. She let out a shaky breath. Quote, 173. Quote, Achos 174. A word that had barely existed in our house before. Quote, 175. I added. Quote, 176. She flinched like I'd slapped her. Then she nodded slowly. That's fair, too. A heavy quiet settled over the room, but it wasn't the suffocating kind I'd grown up with. It felt like a field that had been burned down, dark, empty, and raw, but ready for something new to grow if we were careful. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "We started documenting things," she said. "Not for you. For us. What needs to be done? Who is doing what? When? Like the chart you tried to make that day." I took it. The writing was messy, the categories uneven, but there they were. Their names next to actual responsibilities. My name was not on it. I felt a strange mix of grief and vindication. "This was what I'd been begging for all along," she admitted. I said. She nodded, tears finally spilling over. "Quote 183. I handed the chart back. "Quote 184. I said. "Quote 185. "Quote 186. She whispered. "Quote 187. We sat there for a while talking about small things. Work, school, my new room, the fact that I'd learned to cook for one without making giant family-style portions. When she left, she hugged me at the door. It wasn't the clingy, guilt-soaked embrace I was used to. It was careful, almost respectful. On the way down the hall, she turned back. Quote, 188, quote, she said. Quote, 189. Quote, 190. My throat closed. I hadn't realized how badly I needed to hear that sentence until it was finally out in the open, hanging between us like a bridge. After she left, I sat on my bed and let myself feel everything. The anger that was still there. The relief. The tiny flicker of hope that maybe, slowly, painfully, we could build a different kind of relationship. One where love didn't mean servitude. Weeks later, I returned to the apartment for dinner for the first time. The kitchen wasn't perfect, but it wasn't a disaster either. There was a chore chart on the refrigerator, just like she'd shown me. Each name had tasks underneath. Mine was not there. "You're a guest," my mom said when she saw me looking. "Sit, eat, rest." For the first time in my life, I did. Sitting at that table, I realized something important. My consequence had never really been about payback. It had been about proof. Proof that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't weak, that my pain was real and my boundaries were valid. They had paid a price for taking me for granted. Late fees, stress, sleepless nights, a shaken sense of control. I had paid a price too. Years of my life spent cleaning up after people who didn't see me. Now, at least, the bill was finally on the table, and everyone was looking at it together. If you're watching this and you feel like the unpaid housekeeper of your own family, ask yourself this honestly. If you disappeared tomorrow, would they fall apart because they love you so much, or because they never bothered to learn how to live without using you? And more importantly, what are you going to do about that? Tell me in the comments. Would you stay and keep doing everything? Or would you walk away and let them finally see what you were really worth?